In the year 70 AD, Roman legions sacked and burned Jerusalem. Israel would remain a nation in exile for nearly 2,000 years. But in the aftermath of World War II, the people of the book returned home. Israel's rebirth and survival in the 20th century has often been called a miracle. Those who were there cite their own experiences as proof. I'm Michael Greenspan. I'm an investigative journalist. These are their stories. My network has given me a simple assignment. Go to Israel, investigate stories of supposed miracles that have occurred there, talk to the people who claim they've seen one or been part of one, and find out if there's any truth to it all. If you believe the Bible, Israel's history is filled with stories of miracles. These are the stories I learned as a boy. The parting of the Red Sea, the sun standing still so Joshua could finish a battle, David killing the giant Goliath. If these stories are more than fables, then it wouldn't be inconceivable that they still happen. Today I'm investigating such a story. Two miracles that supposedly occurred in the same place centuries apart. 8 miles north of Jerusalem is a forgettable backwater town called Michmash. Most people have never even heard of it. But two parallel stories apparently occurred here almost 3,000 years apart. One story is in the Bible. The other is recorded in the British war journals of World War I and in the personal memoirs of English Brigadier Major Vivian Gilbert, who was here in 1917. If a miracle took place here, I want to find out for myself. Historian Meir Halevi agreed to meet me and discuss what has been called the miracle at Michmash.
This place called the Valley of Michmash, and this is a historical place where we can see, according to the Bible, the big rock, Sinai, and the other big rock, Botetz. And here we have a living stories, a living history coming out of this place.
I'm also meeting historian Yehuda Noblach, who has studied the events that took place here.
Wadi Michmash used to be the main way of going from Jericho to Jerusalem. The most recent story is times of the British.
In 1917, the world was at war. Turkey's decision to join Germany against England and France would spell the end of the Ottoman Empire. The Turks had ruled Palestine for 400 years. In September, General Allenby arrived in Cairo. By December, Jerusalem was in British hands. On December 9th, Allenby approached Jerusalem's Jaffa Gate, then dismounted his horse and walked into the city on foot, declaring, "I come not as a conqueror, but as a pilgrim." Brigadier Major Vivian Gilbert was there.
People tell me soldiers have no souls. I refuse to believe it. I know what was in our thoughts that day. We experienced the thrill of those that make history. We were proud that Jerusalem, after languishing for over 400 years, should be free at last, and that the prize for which we had undergone so many months of weary fighting should be ours. But above all, we had a great and abiding faith in God, whose mercy had granted us the victory. We felt that somehow it was worth the privations, the heat, the thirst, the loss of comrades who had been more than brothers, the sad memory of lonely graves in Judean hills, the wounds and weariness, to free the Holy Land forever.
February 18, 1918. It had been 2 months since we took Jerusalem. General Allenby has sent my brigade to capture the Turkish garrison at Michmash before the invasion of Jericho. We fully expect the Turks to mount a counter-offensive to try and retake Jerusalem. It will only be safe when we have liberated all of Palestine. We arrived in Michmash Valley yesterday. I'm certain the Turks don't expect an attack. We appear to have arrived undetected. Our general has planned an all-out frontal assault for tomorrow. Artillery, infantry, cavalry. I fear his plan will be costly in lives lost. Earlier this evening, I decided to see what we'll be up against tomorrow. I took 2 men with me to scout the Turkish camp on the cliffs above the valley. The cliffs above Michmash Valley create a formidable fortress. Any attempt to climb the canyon walls would be to invite almost certain suicide. Even so, if there was a way up the cliffs, it would catch the Turks by total surprise. The Turkish garrison is enormous, perhaps several thousand strong. An attack from any side but the steep canyon would be in full sight of the enemy for a great distance. A surprise attack would be impossible unless it was from the canyon itself. With the Turks distracted by an advanced assault on the cliffs, our cavalry could then charge from the plain unnoticed, till they were almost upon them. But without any way to get up the steep cliffs, such a plan is impossible. All night long, I've not been able to escape the thought that I've read about Michmash before. It finally struck me when I opened my Bible. The story's in the book of Samuel. The prophet recorded a battle that became a miracle, that took place in this same valley and on these same cliffs 3,000 years ago. The enormous Philistine army was garrisoned on the plain above the valley of Michmash. They were fearless and brutal. Their raiding parties raped and pillaged the people of Israel without mercy. They seemed unconquerable. The last thing they expected was an attack, certainly not from King Saul of Israel. Any approaching enemy could be seen from miles away. An outpost guarded the steep cliffs down to the canyon, the only possible path for a surprise attack, and the cliffs made such an approach almost unthinkable. At the far end of the canyon, King Saul's, Israel's first king, had a force of barely 600 men, camped in the same place where we sat now. Saul's army was demoralized and weak. Only Saul and his son Jonathan even had a sword. The Philistines had not allowed any blacksmiths in Israel, fearing the Israelites would make weapons to defend themselves. Saul was beside himself as to what to do. But Saul's son Jonathan was not intimidated by the Philistines. A young man of faith and a lot of courage, Jonathan slipped out of the camp one night with his armor-bearer to go find out if God would bring Israel a victory over the Philistines. The 2 men ventured into the moonlit valley, knowing they would easily be seen by the lookouts at the Philistine outpost.
אם הם יגידו לנו לעלות אליהם, זה סימן שאלוהים ייתן לנו ניצחון גדול על הפלישתים הערלים האלה. אבל אם הם יגידו לנו לחכות כאן עד שהם ירדו אלינו, נחזור למחנה. כי זה יהיה האות שאלוהים לא ייתן אותם בידינו.
אני איתך בלב ובנפש, יונתן.
בוא, הבה נתגלה בפניהם.
Where did Jonathan get this idea?
There is no logical explanation to that. Every rational and reasonable person will definitely identify this mission as a suicide mission. To go with one sword against all this army, this is a suicide mission.
هم الخنازير، هم الكلاب، صرختلهم، صرختلهم. تعالوا، تعالوا الموتي، ادخلوا بالمتين، عندنا تعال. أخرجوا كنتم رجالا إليهم انظروا تعالوا انظروا عليهم يا شباب انظروا تعال
Without gathering their weapons, the soldiers began running away in all directions. When Saul's lookout saw what was happening, they ran to the king and reported what they saw.
אדוני המלך, התעורר, התעורר.
אומר, מה העניין?
הפלישתים מלכי, הם בורחים.
אתה מעיר אותי כדי לספר לי מעשיות?
לא מלכי, זאת האמת לאמיתה.
עוד מעלתו, ראינו זאת במו עינינו.
מה ראיתם?
הם נלחמים זה בזה בניסיון לברוח.
לברוח ממה?
לא יכולנו להבחין, אבל ראינו כי הם נסים לעבר הגבעות.
מהר אבנר אסף את הצבא.
כן, אדוני המלך.
היכן יונתן?
איני יודע מלכי, הוא לא בעול שלו, כבר בדקתי.
אז מצא אותו ותאמר לאחי הכהן שהביא את ארון האלוהים. נתן, קרא ונע.
Meanwhile, the tumult in the Philistine camp reached pandemonium. In their panic, the Philistine soldiers were killing one another in a frenzied attempt to escape the massive army they thought was attacking them. The Bible says that panic struck the whole army. The ground shook. It was a panic sent by God. Saul ordered the high priest Ahijah to bring up the Ark of the Covenant to inquire of God what he should do. Saul and his men set out to attack the Philistines. Reaching the abandoned camp, they picked up thousands of weapons left behind by the fleeing Philistine army. Saul and his men would chase them down and realize a great victory over their oppressors. The Bible declares, the Lord rescued Israel that day. We had found Jonathan's secret, the pass he had used to climb the steep cliff. the Turks would never expect an attack from the cliffs. A 3,000-year-old Bible story held the key to our 20th century battle plan.
Gilbert, this is outstanding.
I wondered. I prayed that God would repeat history. The Turkish army was asleep, unaware of our presence. Together we were about to repeat a 3,000-year-old story.
نحن ضع من تحت الهجوم سيدي. الجنرال الإنجليزي ألمبي يمكن قابل جيش لمكماش.
وألمبي olmak lazım. Yettiği getir.
مش حرير ايش دعوة معك اشهد
And so, after thousands of years, British troops successfully copied the tactics of Saul and Jonathan. The afternoon before I left Palestine for England, I wanted to be alone. For 4 years, I had been constantly with men I had learned to admire and trust. I had been through the horrors of a great war, but now the country was at peace and the people were free. We had finished our mission. Peace and freedom were in the Holy Land for the first time for 500 years, and it all seemed worthwhile.
Is there a miracle in the Vivian Gilbert story? Historian Meir Halevi is convinced there is.
Okay, Vivian Gilbert looks in his Bible because this place reminds him of something, and he sees the story of Jonathan against the Philistines and says, ah, this is a very good piece of tactical warfare. I'll try the same tactic and see if it works.
No reasonable and rational soldier or major or officer will come against the Turkish Empire that lands on the plateau right here. This is a miracle.
You think that God throughout history has been especially kind to the Jewish people in performing miracles?
No, he has a redemption. He has a goal to the whole world, and he brings the whole world to this target. And whenever the world does not go to exactly the direction that he wants us to be in, he's just doing a miracle, just, giving us the right direction.
When you say the word miracle, what do you mean by that?
A miracle is that it is out of any regular probability that you could calculate. This is a miracle.
Was there a miracle at Michmash? How could Jonathan, an inexperienced swordsman, manage to kill 30 trained Philistine soldiers by himself? Why would the entire Philistine army mistake Jonathan's attack on the outpost for an army so big they decided their only hope was to run away? Is it a coincidence that Vivian Gilbert read that particular Bible story on the night before his troops were scheduled to make a frontal assault on the Turks, a battle plan that probably would have cost the lives of many of his men? Why did the Turks think Gilbert's small band of men was actually the entire Allenby army of nearly 100,000 troops? Even so, how did Gilbert manage to kill or capture the entire garrison with only a company of soldiers? Good tactics or sheer luck just don't explain it. Maybe a miracle is the only logical explanation. The entire British campaign in Palestine in World War I is filled with such unexplainable stories. Consider this incredible discovery. In Vivian Gilbert's journal, he observed that Britain's liberation of Jerusalem had fulfilled an ancient prophecy. 2,000 years ago, the prophet Daniel received a vision that Jerusalem would be delivered from its enemies in 1,335 years. The prophet Haggai later added that the day of blessing would come on the 24th day of the 9th month of the Hebrew calendar. The date foretold by these two prophets was December the 9th, 1917. The very day the mayor of Jerusalem handed over the keys of the city to the British Army. Historian Yehuda Noblach put it this way:
God makes history, makes the future too.
If God makes history, how can I understand why so many terrible things have befallen Jews over the centuries? How can I explain the destruction of Israel by the Romans, the pogroms of the Russian Tsars, the Nazi Holocaust? Where was God in history at those times? How can I believe in a God that would allow such horrible things to happen to his chosen people? Chosen for what? For me, today raised more questions than answers. But maybe the search itself is part of the answer. Perhaps we simply need to believe in the possibility, and in so doing allow room in our hearts for the truth to reveal itself. For me, I think that's a good place to begin.